Hello and welcome to episode 193 Property Mastermind Podcast with Bob Andersen and Hilary Saxton. Today we are talking raising your standards in property development and how raising your standards really will impact your outcome not only in property development but in life. So let's jump on into episode 193. Hello, episode 193. Great to have you here. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Hilary. How are you today?
I'm good, and thank you for asking. We always get to that point where I say hi, Bob, and he's like, "What are we podcasting?"
Well, I mean, I sort of know who you are because I've seen you before the beginning of the podcast. But
and this was take 4 on the intro.
It was take 4.
Oh my goodness! Sometimes
We're
the intro.
going to run a blooper reel sometime.
Oh, we should run a blue. It's always the intros, and then the whole thing is normal. But for some reason, I blunder the intro so many times. We've got so many. Hello, welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast. Cut. Oh my goodness, wrong one. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's talk about raising your standards in property development. But before we do, what's your tip for the week, Bob?
Well, I just had a minor accident. So I was given a new cup from one of the grandkids and I put a coffee in it and it was getting a little bit cool. So I thought, oh, that's easy. I'll just put it in the microwave and warm it up. What I didn't realise is in some of the writing on the cup, it must be metallic, and next thing, there's sparks flying in the inside the microwave. So I quickly, opened the door, got that out, and the cup was quite hot in certain parts. So I think the tip is, if you've got a new cup and you decide to put it in the microwave, maybe check it out. Just make sure there's nothing metallic in any of the writing or the decals or anything on there, or you're going to cause a lot of sparks.
Oh, I didn't even know the story. My goodness, that's crazy. I've had that actually happen myself, Bob. But I grabbed the cup. It had a piece of silver on the handle, and I grabbed a hold of it, and it burned my hand.
Oh, it would, yeah.
That was at our last place, if you might remember. It was
I do.
a massive burn. So today we're talking raising your standards in property development. Before we do, giving away the book, Property Millionaires Exposed. And this week goes to Glenn Andersen. Glenn, thank you for your email. That's so nice when we get
What a
emails.
nice name.
It was O-N, not E-N, Bob.
Yeah, that's okay.
Speaking of O-N, not E-N, we just realised that for 3 months we had the podcast said your host Hilary Saxton and Bob Andersen. Oh my goodness, I actually had a look at it because I don't do the QC generally, and I thought someone's missed that. There's been a typo and no one picked it up,
Yeah,
which
it suddenly changed.
falls actually under the raising your standards banner. When you think about raising your standards, we're going to go through all the areas where it really matters that you do raise your standards and how it can impact your life. And we've got some great examples of people who have and different ways you can do it. You don't have to go, all the way to the top, but have a think about where you could improve and how you could improve. And when you do, it's kind of like those 1%ers. When you incrementally improve things over time, you end up getting a massive result, just like the English cycling team, if you know that story, but we won't unpack that one now. So anyone interested in learning about property development, 29th of March, we do have our Property Mastermind Masterclass. It's a Saturday morning from 9 till 12:30, 1 o'clock-ish, Sydney time. There'll be a link below for that. But let's get started on why it matters that you raise your standards when you are doing property development. And I want to kick off with this kind of does work in my realm, a lot of this one on this podcast. But I want to tell you a story about a couple who came through the mentoring program, and they actually posted on our closed Facebook group yesterday one of their latest projects, and they did a fabulous job, and that's John and Taz. And I think you'll find the episode around 89. It's around that area. We did have a chat with them. They've got Mela Developments. And they do some beautiful stuff in Victoria, absolutely beautiful. Their design, everything they do is just of that high standard, that quality. And that's their niche, and that's okay. And I'm not saying that you need to pick that niche to be amazing, because your niche might be average rentals, and you smash that market and you do a fabulous job bringing to the market what's required. But what John and Taz did when it came to raising their standards, one, they really got educated, and they not just on property development. Clearly, they joined the Property Mastermind community. They've got the online course. They've got Bob on tap. They've got that support there. But they also really looked at themselves. They gave themselves great goals. We're both working now. At this point, one leaves their job. At this point, the next person leaves their job, and they had a plan. And trust me, it wasn't easy for these guys. They were stepping outside of their comfort zone, like many of us do, all of the time. In things that we do, but they did little things. When they worked with me, we looked at their values each individually, what John's were, what Taz's were, and then what the values of their development company were. And they infused them and made sure that their values were being met. And when you do that, it makes achieving goals, it makes your happiness so much higher, your happiness levels, which will in turn increase your level of success. They went as far as infusing their values. They've got 2 daughters, they went through the daughters, and then they came up with a set of family values. And when I say values, it's not just value, it's not just honesty and integrity and, just the basics that we often hear of. We all have our own values that are important to us. But one of Bob's high values would be family. One of my high values is health. So we have about 5 that are important to us, and they're the things. They're like our true north. They're like our driving compass. They're about the things that are really important to us. And when we neglect those in life, we become unhappy. When we're unhappy, we become unmotivated. We don't do the things we want to do. So these guys actually, as part of their strategy in raising their standards, they did those little things, and that made a massive success for them. For them to succeed, they put on the back burner, getting the new house. They rented. If you listen to their story, it's a fabulous story. But they have got where they wanted to go. And Bob, what would you talk about with these guys? What do you see when we talk about raising your standards? And if we look about them as a couple and other mentoring students that you've worked with, what are your thoughts there on those that really implement great strategies into their life?
Well, I think that when you do that, and you alluded to it, it makes what could be a job something that you really love doing, because it's just you're totally in alignment with your business, yourself and your business. And look, that's not always the case with business owners. It's certainly not always the case with employees as well. So, when you get those two in alignment, it's great. And also, you'll probably cover it later on, because this podcast is more up your alley. It's a little bit up mine, but mostly up yours. Attention to detail, those sorts of things. I mean, they just come out of that natural just wanting to be the best.
Yes, they certainly did. That's just those guys, Bob. But you've worked with enough people to notice those that do raise their standards and notice those that don't. I'm thinking Ravi, highly driven man, has high standards. I saw he's booked into your diary for next week, actually. Always coming back. How can I do better? What can I do now? Looking for that next level to improve themselves, to raise their standards. Do you notice a correlation, and I'm hoping that's a yes answer, between those who are like that and those that you see that are a little bit more relaxed?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Jamie as well. When we had, Jamie stepped right up too. We got plenty of great examples of that. But
from Zoho Developments.
Yeah. But you're right, some are slow to understand, slow to pick it up. They, it could have a bit to do with their background, with their upbringing, but look, it's something that anybody can really learn to raise their standards, I think. But, of course, you have to want to, and you have to see the benefit of doing it. And for some people, it's a personality change in a way. And it's not as easy for some people. But, look, self-improvement, you have to make the decision that you want to do it. That's only the beginning. Then you've got to do it. And everybody, I could raise my standards in a lot of things as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, Bob.
Oh, that might be a different podcast.
No.
That could be a podcast between just the two of us, perhaps.
No. I'm thinking you're pretty good just the way you are. I think what you've alluded to there is our different personalities and our natural strengths and weaknesses. And we know from your personality profile, because you've done your DISC profile, and your actual natural ability, meaning your attention to detail, wasn't your strongest, but now you've had to learn that. So when you said people have to change, really it's like you have to adapt sometimes and look at the areas where you're weaker and just improve on those weakness areas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've seen me sit down and read. In fact, I did the other day. I think I read a 62-page contract. I read building contracts. I read large document. That's not me.
No.
I can fall asleep easily reading stuff like that. But because I have to, I've trained myself to do it without, mostly to stay awake for a start, but to actually be able to focus and do that, because sometimes you have to do that. And that's, as you say, that's not a natural thing for me. I'm sort of a bit more higher level, I guess, than that, right down in the weeds in the detail. But there's times when you have to do that.
So, Bob, how did you do it? What was the realisation? When was that point that you were like, holy moly, I have to increase my skill level in this area? Or when was that? Do you remember it, or it's just something that's happened?
It was a long time ago.
Do you have
everything with me? I can't remember any one thing in particular, but I can tell you it would have come off something where I've made a mistake or haven't done something, and then I've looked back and I thought, I didn't pick that up. I didn't pick that up. And I didn't pick it up because I probably speed read something, or, I'm just going to scan that 30-page document or whatever it is. And it would have come off pain. That's what would have made me change. I've got to do better. And then you train yourself and, I can do it. I'd rather sit down and read a good autobiography or something like that. But, if I've got to read a building contract or a long joint venture agreement, information memorandum, whatever I've got to do.
I have seen you go through many mentoring students' contracts. When you do that for them, do you also ensure that they've read it themselves? Because sometimes there is that tendency for people to go, oh, well, can you look at this? Meaning, have you looked at it fully yourself? Do you usually feel comfort, or do you?
Well, that's the job of a mentor, isn't it, really? But what I'd say to them is read it and take notes. Either highlight what don't you understand, highlight it. I'll go through it as well, because having been through thousands of these things, I pretty well know. If you throw a master builders or HIO building contract, I know everything that's in it. But I'll ask them to look, take notes, then get back to me, and then we'll go through it together. And I'll pick up things they didn't pick up, but at least they've made the effort, and they'll learn from that. So that's the best way of learning, not having me do it. That's like project management. You're never going to learn property development if you've got a project manager doing the work for you. Nothing wrong with that if that's the way you want to go, but you want to learn how to be a developer. You want to learn these things.
And Bob, let's look at the difference of high standards when it comes to decision making. What do you think is the issue? What do you think is the issue there when it comes to standards and decision making? You could say, Hilary, you can answer that.
Well, these are right up your alley. You're so used to interviewing me.
Yeah, I know.
I think you just keep throwing everything at me, and I'm thinking in my head, hang on, that's a Hilary thing.
The thing is with decision making, it is a habit, and we get into the habit of not making a decision. So if you put things off and don't like making decisions, and you have every excuse in the world as to why you are, and it's perfect, I'll make that. I can't make that decision because you'll give yourself plenty of reasons and excuses. Really, it's a habit, and you need to look at the habit behind you not making a decision, because putting a decision off and then not making it is a decision in itself. It is just the lazy default decision. So decision making is an important skill to learn for those who have children now. When you ask them something, and let them make their own decision, because it's practicing that muscle. Because it's just practicing the habit of making decisions and getting better and better at it. So if you don't, it's because maybe you've been a bit of a wallflower in the past, or you think, I just go with the flow because I'm a good sort. You know what? You're not doing yourself any favours by not decision making. Even if you do want to go with the flow, maybe in your head you could say, my decision would be that, but I'm happy to move on. You don't have to let the other person know, but get into the habit of making decisions, because I have seen it in our community where people have had sites and they just couldn't pull the trigger, and you know who I'm talking about even more recently, and we just shake our head thinking, oh my goodness, you just lost a truckload of money because you just couldn't decide to say yes and move forward.
That's fear, but then what's the fear based on?
The fear is based on, it's really just safety, looking after yourself. So people would prefer to stay in a place of stuckness that they know they're moving into a place that they're unaware of to become unstuck.
I don't want to go to the place of stuckness.
You do not want to go to the place of stuckness, Bob, because you know what that is? That's just a rut.
You know what's a rut?
A rut is just a grave with the ends kicked out. You don't want to be stuck in the rut.
Don't want to be there. But that's one of the things I've heard you say many times, and until I met you, I hadn't heard it, that not making a decision is actually making a decision. The decision to not make a decision. It is a decision.
Yep. Because even, say you have to make a decision, shall we purchase that property or shall we pick this area as our patch? And then you keep fumbling around with it and you don't make a decision, your decision is no. We won't. So you just fall to the default, because even when you say not making a decision is effectively making a decision, it is one way or the other. So you're just choosing the one that you feel a bit more lazy on, or you're just defaulting to.
Then you ask the question, is property development for you?
It is for people, because they're just awareness, human awarenesses or personal development skills that can be developed. And if you're doing that within property development, you're probably doing it within your relationship, within your career, within many areas of your life, your health. So many will be impacted now by you being indecisive. So if we look at raising your standards in property development, having strong decision-making skills is one of them. Looking at, infusing your values into your life is one of them.
I think I'm indecisive, but I'm just not sure.
Oh, Bob. Is that Bob being funny? So, Bob, when it comes to financial feasibilities, how would you look at raising your standards there if you're new to property development, or if you've perhaps been a bit slack on it?
Well, we have spoken about financial feasibilities, I think, in some of the recent podcasts. They're absolutely critical, because it's what comes off the back of that is is this thing profitable or not profitable? And that decides whether you do it or not, whether you say yes to this or no, or is it a lemon? Does it not work at all? And so it's something that you have to do, and you have to be detailed on it. Feasibilities. I mean, I love doing feasibilities, which is a little bit weird, other than the fact that I really love numbers, I think. So I'm really, I was good at maths. I love numbers. I love feasibilities, and I love the excitement, even though I've got a pretty good idea if something's going to work or not before. But yeah, for people is to become really proficient in it. And also the other side of that, which is a numbers thing, I guess, as well, is finance. You've got to remember that not everybody watching our podcast is part of our community. In fact, most aren't. So you may never have done any studies in property development. You might be thinking, I'd love to do it. Well, I'm telling you, that's one of the things that you really need to get a handle on quite early, is how to do a feasibility, and know everything to put in. Don't leave stuff out. And so that's it. And finance as well. Most people are familiar with standard types of finance, but become familiar with the sort of finance that we use when we do development. And that's going to be a big help, because so much about property development in the early stages, if it's going to work or not, will come around the feasibility, and coming off the back of that feasibility is the finance numbers and how that's going to work.
So really what you're saying is educate yourself on both of those two will help with raising your standards.
Yeah, and you don't have to be good at maths. You might not even like maths, You might be an artistic sort of person. Well, that's great. When you get into the design, that'll help. But the numbers are simple. And particularly, we have a feasibility calculator in our program, which makes life a lot easier when you're doing that. But don't be scared of numbers. You're going to have to make them your friend.
Yeah. The next one we're going to talk about is time management. Being disciplined and planning and execution, that's probably something I'm a bit more involved with. And I do find that when we first kick off with people, so, often ours are in the mentoring realm, but even people just within the community often get asked about time management. It's probably one of the bigger ones. You've got to remember, if you're adding something new in, so you have a full-time job or you're working whatever you work, and then maybe you have family and, Sundays is your family day, and you've got relatives that you've got already things that are set into your week. If you're going to do property development, initially there's that early time where you need to learn about it. There's also that period of time where you need to have that time for patch finding and your research time, really understanding, raising your standards enough to move forward and do things properly to make a great profit, of which is great profit to be made. And we're not trying to make this scary, but we're just trying to make you realise what is involved. And when we talk about time management, if you're already busy, look at your diary, and I do get clients to do this. Look at your week and think, where are my spots? So if I normally get out of bed at 6:30 in the morning, will I need to get up at 5:30? If I normally, have an hour for lunch every day, will I be having half an hour for lunch and then grabbing that extra half hour, by the end of the week? That's 2.5 hours, using that time. If, Saturdays is my kick back and watch the footy or go down to the local or whatever that is, will that be pulled back? You've got to look at where you can get that time from. It's not just going to magic itself out of nowhere. So where can you find that extra time? And then my suggestion is make yourself a calendar. A coach got me to do this years ago that I work with. I was business coaching, but I hired another business coach because I believe in the power of having that person to be accountable to and pushing you to, raising my standards, because that's what I always like to do. And she got me to write out my week in a Excel spreadsheet and then plot in everything that went in. Everything that I did in a day, all the appointments that I have, and I've mostly been self-employed, which comes with its own challenges because you've got to be quite disciplined. You're not going to work and then going home. So it has flexibility, but it can add challenges if you get a bit undisciplined. But what that did was made me realise the amount of time that I did have available and where I could put things that I thought I didn't have time for. So if you do struggle with prioritising time, maybe that's something that you should do. Stand back, have a look at your week. And we included things in there like house play. She called it house play instead of housework. So the things, you've got to mow the lawns, you've got to wash the car, and maybe you do the cooking and the cleaning, whatever it is you do in the home. Put all of that in there so you can actually see what time that you do have available, and then really be very quite diligent initially with executing that, so you do have a positive outcome with it, rather than going through all the time in the world, wasting time making it and then not doing anything about it, which some people tend to do. They love the idea of planning something, but that you have to execute the plan for it to work. Your thoughts on that, Bob?
Yeah, and what about analysing where your time goes now? And are there things that you really don't need to be doing? Do you really need to be spending an hour a day on Facebook? Do you need to be spending 30 minutes on Instagram or whatever it is, Are there things in your life that you could put aside for the time being that you could reduce? It's not that hard to find some time.
Pockets,
yeah. Bursts of activity too.
And don't get caught in the trap of I need an hour or I need 2 hours. Because when we do that, when we make something too big, then we're less likely to do it. So what if you were to allocate the 30 minutes or the 20 minutes? Like, if that's something that would be easier for you, especially when it comes to learning, my recommendation is 20 to 30 minutes at a time, chunk it down. Especially with our online course, just do one video at a time, because your comprehension and the retention of information will be much higher. Yeah, so don't fall into that need to have to do an hour. I say that with exercise as well. I need to go for an hour's power walk or, a huge run. You actually don't. You just need to do something. And Bob's got a son-in-law. He's an extremely busy, successful man running numerous businesses and working, and oh my goodness, I don't even know how they function. But they grab exercise in 6-minute bits. I'm pretty sure that's how they do it, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've got a gym outside the front door.
Every minute's accounted for.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely like that. But that's how they fit it into their world, because they've got small children and the kids get involved in doing it. They've made it fun. Yeah, so they've got a great way. So there are different strategies for the way you can implement things like that. But what about quality control, like raising your standards? We're talking quality control when it comes to ensuring the developments have the standard that you want. And we've seen this recently with people in our community. One of them got a bad builder, something that I'm involved with, and it's really impacted. But luckily, she did go in and took control of that situation. But what about that? How do we deal with raising your standards when you've got contractors or etc. not with the same level that you have?
Well, even dealing with consultants, let's say, just holding them accountable for a start. That might be raising your standards, but it makes them raise theirs as well. When you've got people who don't have a deadline and you don't check in on their deadline, it'll drift. And in property development, every day costs you money, it's interest. If you work out the amount of money it costs every day, and I was to come over and take that amount of money out of your pocket, you'd quickly realise that time's very critical. We were talking about that today, in fact, where somebody realises now that they could have been tighter with their consultants.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Their learning from it was, we really wished that we had been a bit more assertive. Not aggressive, but assertive. No. And assertive's okay. Assertive is positive. Where they follow up, where they check in, where they say, well, hey, you said that was going to be done a week ago and it's not. And now, it's next week and next week and next week. There has been too many a week ago. So, yes, that was definitely a conversation that I'd had recently with somebody. And Bob, just really talking the next one about networking and relationships, how do you feel that goes with raising your standards for property development? And you're a classic example for this because your network is extensive and you've got great contacts.
Well, I built them over time, good relationships. I mean, I use about 5 different lawyers for different things, but I'm still using a lawyer. I met, he just come out of university and he's my age. So that's long relationship.
Yeah, I'm thinking the short ones though, because new people getting started, they will bring those relationships forward if they're good. But what about...
That's what I mean, cultivate good ones.
Yes.
And they'll go forever.
Yeah.
But always look for new relationships. And that comes from networking, I guess. What is networking? It's a word that's flogged around way too much.
I love that word, flogged. It's flogged.
Flogged.
You're flogging that word, Bob. Yes.
You'd have opinion on that.
I've got an opinion on most things, and I'm not afraid to give it. I don't care if you disagree, but hey, I like to have an opinion. And that, my friends, is a little bit like decision making. That is a habit. Have an opinion. It doesn't have to be right. You can be wrong. If you're wrong, you just say, I was wrong. It doesn't actually matter. But my opinion on networking is it doesn't always have to be live. I went to an event yesterday and it was interesting. There were 7 women at my table. And 2 of them were good friends of mine, and I met a couple of other people, and it was really interesting. I met a real diverse bunch of women, which was great. But none of those women knew how to network. Not one of them asked me about me, which is crazy because one of them I could definitely help in a massive way, and I'm a fabulous connector. But it's really interesting. Networking is you talk to somebody about them and they talk to you about you, and then you look at how perhaps in the future you could have a relationship or you could connect them with somebody else. So networking isn't going to a place, standing in the corner and just hanging out with your mate Nigel or Nancy. It's more around catching up or connecting with a lot of people for positive outcomes, and the positive outcome may not be with you, it may be with somebody else. You may be able to connect somebody else in the future. In fact, yesterday afternoon, I even connected 2 people with a fabulous person who I thought would really help them with their property development journey. I said, hey, I'll do an introduction over email, and this person emailed me back. They were like, Hilary, thank you so much, you're a legend. And I'm like, well, I like what you do, trust you, you're a great person, so I'd recommend you. So just remember that with networking. Remember, it's a 2-way thing. You want to give other people information about you and you want to hear about what they do. And I think it's a skill that a lot of people don't realise. I think they think you go somewhere and just hang out with your mates. But you need to go somewhere, massage the room. Like I said, I know everybody at that table. I know what they do, the whole lot of them, but not one of them would know what I do, apart from my 2 friends. That's
because all they want to do is talk about themselves.
Yeah, they don't know how to network, and yeah,
but there's no bigger turn off for me.
It's not that. I just think it's not. They just don't understand the power of connecting, of knowing people. It's not
maybe, but like when you got somebody, all they can do is just talk about themselves. That does switch me off pretty fast.
So one of those people was like that.
Not that I want to tell everybody about me. I mean, I'm interested in people, but they just see it as a one-way street.
Yeah, there was only one of those people at the table.
Thank goodness.
And yeah, I did actually pretty much switch off, but yeah.
But you are a great connector and you're a great introducer.
That's called networking as well.
The most prolific one that I know.
Yes. I know of a couple of others that are pretty good. But Bob, back to what you were saying about the relationships you've had forever, I think what the summary for that is if you get a good relationship, then nurture it. Meaning when you give a referral to somebody, I believe that it should be done via email so the person knows that you've referred them. That's really useful because then there's that whole, okay, that person likes me. It adds a bit of credibility to that relationship. Yeah. It gives it depth rather than just saying, contact such and such. We have so many people that come to us and have come to the mentoring program or talk about it, and then they'll say, it was actually referred from X, or I tell you who does, Clayton Tierney. He refers so many people because he's just a great guy, but we would do the same. We would refer people back to him. So when people refer us, we definitely refer them. On saying that, I've seen plenty of our community, and I hope you're listening, all of you, on other people's podcasts and not saying that it was up to you. You were the person that got them started. There's somebody huge right now in investments, property development investments. He started a podcast. He started off with Bob Andersen, and I don't think he's ever mentioned it once. And I think that kudos as well is a huge part of your journey, and it's a part of networking. Networking is more than just going out and meeting people. There's, giving that, recommending people. There is connecting with people, and there's getting to know people. It goes more than that, and it can be done online. It can be done live. It can be anywhere.
And it can come back at some time in the future.
Totally.
I was just looking at something one of the mentoring students has sent in, and there's some architectural plans attached to the email. And it's a special type of development. It's not just your regular one. And, I know that architect. I haven't spoken to him for 10 years, but I knew him pretty well back then. And that got me thinking about, I'm going to just contact him and say, hey, just saw your name pop up. Because I don't know where that's going to lead. He might say, oh, Bob, geez, how are you going? What are you up to these days? Actually, one of my clients has a site. Or it could be anything. It might be nothing. But, that's a 10-year gap. I've forgotten about him. And now all of a sudden I've seen his name again. And now I'm going to contact him.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So nurturing and relationships are so important. Yeah, I just don't think it can be said enough that you've got to realise, well, I think we just mentioned the other day, our broker jumped into a deal at the end and became part of the finance because the financier was just too slow and slack. So you just never know, and that just came from a relationship. So we're incredibly lucky. So that nurturing relationships, good networking, both ways, all of that stuff, this all comes with raising your standards. So let's, Bob, look at common pitfalls and how you overcome them. So let's look at accepting poor quality work from contractors. How do we raise standards
from builders.
there?
It'd be builders in our case, or consultants, it could be. We can't put up with it. With consultants, it's great if you can get a good referral to somebody, and you were just talking about that, but you can't always get a good referral. Sometimes you've just got to, throw a dart at a board. And some of the work is substandard. They could be slow, it could be substandard. You might not know that an engineering design is substandard until whoever it is that's going to build it realises it's substandard. But you can't put up with it. So you have to produce expectations. We alluded to that before when we talked about dealing with consultants, for instance, and you mentioned consultants, timeframes, hold them accountable, and don't wait till their time's up. Contact them. If they say they're going to do something in 2 weeks, contact them in a week and check in. Hey, you promised me, good word to use, that it's going to be ready next week. Are you still on time?
Can I give you a tip there? Bob just used the word "you promised me." The next word you use is "because," and there have been many studies on using this word. So, hey, you promised me, so that's a little bit, this is what you said you would do, you're not being true to your word. You promised me the X. I really needed it then. And then if you add "because," and it doesn't even matter what comes after the "because," for those of you who know the study, it was done at a photocopy machine where they got people, do you know the study?
You told me about it, yeah.
So where they got people to stand in line and say, well, do you mind if I just go in front of you? Would you mind? And I don't know the ratio. It was most people will sort of, no, not really. But when they said,
wait your turn.
Yes, you can wait your turn. But when they said, would you mind if I just jump in front of you? Because it could have been something like, my coffee's sitting on my desk and I don't want it to get cold. It didn't even matter what it was. It could have been something so minor and not related. But when you add the word "because," people are more likely to give you what you want. So there you go. There's a week.
I remember that one now that you said that. But,
yes.
But say you do check in after a week and they're a week off. You could remind them, and I love to use the word promise, even though they didn't use it when they gave you a time frame, because it's costing me $150 a day. And if you hold me up, every day you hold me up, it's going to cost me $150. I haven't used that one.
But you will now?
Well, most of the consultants I use have got them pretty well trained, so we don't have to do that. But yeah, that'd be interesting.
Because $150 a day is a lot of shoes for the missus. Bob?
Not your shoes.
And my terrible slag. What about failing to hold themselves accountable from learning and improving? We've covered that with time, and that's something you've just got to be diligent and choose to step up. And if you're not prepared to, well then you're probably not going to have a great experience.
Well, you pay the penalty.
Yeah. And the penalty is maybe...
Cost you money.
Yeah, money. and then allowing doubt to stop you from taking the necessary steps. And that's just personal growth. That's decision making. That's an open growth mindset, meaning I don't know that yet, but I can learn it. All of the things that we know, understanding your values, infusing them into your life, just being better and being honest with yourself about being better too. It's very easy to think, oh, I'm going to do that now, and then not doing it. You actually have to take the actions to do it. So, Bob, would you like to summarise anything else that you want to talk about before we close off this podcast this week?
Nothing to summarise other than we've got a few events coming up.
We do, and the one we're talking about today is the masterclass on the 29th of March. So
You did mention that.
there'll be a link.
29th of March.
There'll be a link below. Otherwise, if you want to have a chat to me about property development or how you might like to raise your standards and what you're currently doing, maybe our mentoring programs for you, that's fully a conversation you can have with me before you move forward. There'll be a link to my diary below as well. So we hope you've got some great tips and you feel like raising your standards, and you're going to implement a few of the strategies we've talked about today. And we'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye.